Suns versus Nuggets, or Nuggets versus Suns, 1v4, Mr. Grant Hughes. What is your biggest overarching question for this series?
I think it's got to be because it was one of the most important, unknowns of the whole playoffs is how's Denver going to defend? Is this a series that is going to challenge the Nuggets and Jokic in space? Does it matter that the Suns don't even really care about getting to the rim unless they absolutely need to, because they'll just pull up and make 3 out of 4 mid-range shots? I guess you could argue that the way the Suns like to play offense makes it less likely that the Nuggets issues are going to be exposed defensively. But yeah, that's the first factor, is just what does Denver's coverage initially look like against, ball screens up top involving Jokic? Do the Suns, if it's Chris Paul, for example, and Ayton, like, is Chris Paul going to be able, what kind of shots does Chris Paul want to get out of those sets? And what kinds of shots are the Nuggets willing to concede? That's where the series starts for me. And then everything kind of spirals outward from there. Do you have something different than Nuggets defense?
Yeah, my actual biggest question was the Suns defense. They just literally let the Clippers cook when the Clippers didn't have their 2 best players for most of the series. And so there's some concerns level there. And their rotation is it's not shallow, because I really like Biyombo, and I feel like this is more of a Josh Okogie series when you're looking at trying to defend Jamal Murray, versus Craig might be better if you have the bigger wing creators like the Clippers had at one point in that series. But let's talk about the Nuggets defense, because I think that's probably that's going to be, I'm assuming it's the more widely talked about aspect. I can't bring myself, and I was listening to the Dunker Spot talk about the Nuggets defending the Suns. I'm starting to think, just because Nikias and Steve Jones are so much smarter than I am, have a great pulse on just like what teams would be concerned about. I guess I'm under concerned about the Chris Paul matchup, because I feel like Jamal Murray can absolutely handle him at this point. And it's not actually an indictment on Chris Paul so much as there are just pockets of possessions where Jamal Murray is so tough to do things with, to move, like displace when he's on defense. And I'm also wondering, you mentioned the rim pressure from the Suns. In theory, like, if you're going to play more conservative with Jokic, the Suns are built to carve you up, because they're just going to absolutely destroy you from mid-range. I'm wondering, I look at the Timberwolves series, and on the one hand, I'm like, there were times where Jokic just was like so far away from Rudy Gobert, and you're trusting your backline defense, that you're not going to have that luxury against the Suns. And then I'm kind of like, well, why not?
Right.
Because DeAndre Ayton will bail out a lot of the times if he catches the ball. If he's hitting his mid-range or getting all the way to the basket, then you sort of get yourself concerned with, okay, well, now we have to, like, what do we do? Are we like, what? Like, I think it gets harder if DeAndre Ayton's giving you actual rim pressure, or again, knocking down his jumpers. But the other thing I'm wondering, and I know they're not going to do this. I know they're not going to, because Aaron Gordon's already talking about defending Kevin Durant. What if you just said, hey, we're going to throw Michael Porter Jr. on Kevin Durant so that Aaron Gordon can still be that form of backline help, because we have KCP on Devin Booker. You're not going to throw Gordon on Booker. Like, is that, and then we're going to play Jokic super aggressively. And maybe that's our counter to, you have this 7-footer who can run pick and rolls in Kevin Durant. I'm just wondering if that's something they could try. I don't think it's necessary, but like, could we see them get super? And look, Zach Lowe has wrote about all the different things the Nuggets have tried. Ben Taylor was first on it for Thinking Basketball, had a great YouTube video on their peel switching tactics. I actually think that Denver, and this is not to say that they're just going to run away with this series, I actually think that Denver's better built to defend this team right now than people are crediting them. And a lot of that to me has to do with, Jamal Murray had more of an up and down series, I think, against the Timberwolves than a lot of his stats suggest. He had some very just hot stretches shooting that propped up some of his numbers. But I have more confidence in him defensively. Just like I have more confidence in Devin Booker turning in like defensive player of the year shit against the Clippers in game 1. But I think they're better built to guard the Suns than we're crediting. And that's a lot of it has to do with Jamal Murray, but I think all more of it has to do with, well, if you play ultra aggressive, I trust that Michael Porter Jr., or if you go to the Bruce Brown, amalgam of, okay, we're pulling Michael Porter Jr. for Bruce Brown, I trust that there's going to be enough answers to what Phoenix is doing, unless they're getting to the basket more or DeAndre Ayton is one getting the basket more, two hitting his jumpers or his turnarounds when there's like no one in front of him. So that's maybe I'm not giving DeAndre Ayton enough credit. And maybe I'm somehow not giving Chris Paul enough credit because you just have three guys on this roster who in theory are built to carve up the most popular defensive coverage that you may see during this series.
Is it as simple as Denver might be able to slow down the Suns, but the Suns cannot stop the Nuggets? Like that's kind of where I'm
that's where I was going with how do the Suns defend the Nuggets? I think it's you could say we know Ayton, you're not going to throw doubles at Jokic because of what he will do to you with those doubles.
You can't.
And I think and maybe I didn't see enough of the tail end of the Phoenix Clippers series, which was not the one that I kind of neglected, but it was just without Kawhi and Paul George, it was just not compelling to me.
You're not going to get any good information there.
The Nuggets have just way more off-ball movement than most of the Clippers offensive sets. And even with Russ playing without Kawhi and Paul George, I would argue that's still the case there. It gets a lot harder. And when you're talking about DeAndre Ayton becomes ultra important because he's going to be going up against Jokic one-on-one most of the time. But filling out that fifth wheel spot is really hard to me because that's the player in theory who you're going to, unless you think Devin Booker can go against Jamal Murray, which, hey, I won't rule it out. If you play Josh Okogie to say we need him to go after Jamal Murray, I think that makes sense. What if he's not hitting enough threes at the other end? That's also we talk about Denver's defense, that's giving them a point of flexibility. To where if Josh Okogie's there, I might be like, hey, you know what, Michael Porter Jr., you go defend Kevin Durant, Aaron Gordon, you're on that, and you just try and swivel. Be behind Jokic, send help or blitzes where you need to. That's something they could look at. But there's also, we've seen stretches where Okogie has hit some of his threes, but if you think you can't play him on offense, that increases the importance of Torrey Craig, which I do then believe makes it harder to defend Jamal Murray with. I think like Okogie is just a better answer there. And so I'm very fascinated to see. And also we talk about the Suns have a 7-footer who's an all-time great, can get a shot off over everybody. Michael Porter Jr. can do the same thing, not off the dribble the way that Kevin Durant can, but you're not going to you could maybe cheat off him if you're trying to, depending on who you want to stash there. But he's not, you don't look at Mike, the person you're going to it's Aaron Gordon, who's just been rough on offense for a while now. Had a hell of a defensive series, I think, against the Timberwolves for the most part. I think you phrased it best, but as I'm rambling here, is that the Nuggets, to me, have a better chance of disrupting the Suns offense than the Suns do. No one's going to, first of all, these games are going to be like, I'm smashing the over on game one if I'm a bettor, because I think that it's going to undersell what I think it was at 225 when I looked. These games are going to be in the 240s, I think.
So, I mean, I phrased it as a question because I'm not sure. I think it's, so the problem with the problem with the idea of the Suns can't stop Denver and the Nuggets maybe can slow down the Suns, and therefore this is a Nuggets series. The problem is I think the Suns basically play a style and have the personnel that sometimes the defense doesn't matter. Like Durant is just the quintessential example of that, where you can cover him perfectly and he's just going to make 8 out of 10, contested jumpers on some nights. And that's what decides the game. So in some sense, the Suns have the ability to sort of be immune to defense. But at the same time, there will be nights where they just don't make every mid-range shot. And the Nuggets, again, I don't think are going to be stoppable defensively. So the Okogie thing, I agree. He sort of has to be involved. And we never care about depth in the playoffs, but you got to have a fifth guy. The Cavs series proved that, and
I would think you have to have a sixth too, right?
Sure, you got to have a fifth. You really have a fifth. Because so it's not going to be that different than the Okoro treatment, or go back to the Tony Allen treatment or whatever, or how I was just talking about how the Celtics will happily let PJ Tucker shoot. I think at least in game one, if Okogie is in the game, he's not going to be defended. So unless he's going to go Gary Payton II and just perfectly time every baseline cut, to catch lobs and dunk them, Okogie might just be someone that you really can't have him out there in what is probably going to be a shootout because he's a great defensive player and he hustles and he plays really hard. But like, if you're right, and I think you are, that it's just going to be who outscores the other team. Like Okogie's not helpful in that effort, outscoring people, especially, if one of his jobs is going to be to maybe, I don't know, double Jokic. We don't want to see that, but like, he's not shutting down. I don't know. So yeah, I'm also talking in circles because we're just, dealing in hypotheticals here, and we're trying to forecast a series that is
because the Suns are still so foreign.
Right. We don't know anything about the Suns. Like if we learned
relative to going up against the Nuggets specifically too. It's just like we have more information on the Suns after watching the Clippers series, but like it's just Kevin Durant wasn't there.
Well, and even if we had seen Kawhi and Paul George in the first round, who cares what we would have learned there, because the Nuggets don't have that guy. They're totally differently constructed. The defensive challenges they present are completely different than the Clippers hypothetically would have if Kawhi had stayed healthy all series. Or Paul George had been involved. So yeah, I keep coming back to the original question, like of one can maybe stop the other, and this being the Nuggets and the Suns, I don't think are going to stop. Like, what does it look like? What does a successful defensive Suns series look like? Like Jokic just isn't willing to try to go for 50 in single coverage. Like that, he just won't do it.
If you rewind, and he could do this, he's so much better than he was 2 and 3 years ago, which is it's just like, and I think it looks successful if you've rattled Jamal Murray and or Michael Porter Jr. You've killed the non-Jokic minutes where you have Murray and Porter Jr. staggering from him. That's probably what it looks like most successfully. And you could throw this at like, what does a successful defensive performance look like for the Nuggets? I've even entertained, and maybe it's because I know Gordon will spend so much time on Durant, but just watching Devin Booker, I'm more concerned about the Nuggets matching up with Devin Booker than I am about Durant, in part because we know Gordon's going to go on Durant. But I've also thought, like, if you don't trust KCP or Bruce Brown to handle that, like, why not just try? And there are going to be possessions where Kevin Durant, I'm still not used to it. He's just in the corners. And I'm imagining they won't let this happen if this ends up being the case. But like, then just have Michael Porter Jr. there. And maybe does Aaron Gordon need to take on Devin Booker? Is he your best option there? Because Devin Booker is a better passer than Kevin Durant. I hope that's not a hot take for him. He's a better passer than Kevin Durant, smarter passer than Kevin Durant. And he's just better. He's not better. He's also more familiar with this team. When you're looking at when they're not involved in the primary actions, whether they're not a screener or if they're not the ball handler, he's inherently more dangerous than Kevin Durant because of the way that he's able to move, or maybe he'll be more likely to go get the ball. And that could end up really hurting, every team, but the Nuggets specifically there, though. And so I find myself, I don't know how much I'm influenced by the fact that we know Aaron Gordon is the quote unquote Kevin Durant answer for Denver. I am so much more concerned about how Denver guards Devin Booker. I've actually wondered, is this a Christian Brown series in the sense that Bruce Brown is 6'4", KCP 6'5", 6'4", just throw the 6'7" guy who can move on Devin Booker. He's a rookie and he might get absolutely roasted. But is that something they look at?
I think if you're the Nuggets and you come into this series doing anything but making Devin Booker like your first, like we got to deal with that guy first priority, you're making a mistake. And then you're necessarily diverting resources from Kevin Durant. And that feels real scary to me. Like there is a version of this series where we emerge from it, the Suns have won, and we look at each other and say, well, shit, Kevin Durant still is the best player on planet Earth. Because he just, the Nuggets couldn't afford to give him the attention that you would normally give a Kevin Durant. And he, shoots 65% in a 5-game series win. And because like you have to put Devin Booker at the top of the scouting report because he's, other than Jimmy Butler, he's been the best player in the postseason, I think, and just has shown a total offensive package.
Mitchell Robinson.
Besides Mitchell Robinson, right? Yeah. Mitchell Robinson's like, it's like how we always say this guy's the best at X other than Steph. This guy's the best at X other than Mitchell Robinson. That is a scenario that feels real to me where Kevin Durant just wins this series. But I do like the idea that you've mentioned of just we're not going to stop him. So let's put MPJ on him and just use our defense elsewhere to hope that Devin Booker doesn't carve us up and we can handle the Ayton Paul pick and roll with 4 quality defenders, and MPJ just hang out over there and hope the Suns don't remember that Kevin Durant can come like get handoffs and move off the ball. That's one way to combat that.
We've somehow talked about all of this before we end immersions, and I still think that DeAndre Ayton might be the player that defines the offensive series for Phoenix because of what it would mean for how Denver needs to defend.
That's a huge problem for the Suns. If DeAndre Ayton matters that much, I'll taking the Nuggets in a short series.
If Ayton's not like gonna get to the basket with or without the ball, shouldn't it make it a lot easier and more efficient and effective to play Jokic up? Is not, to actually blitz, because the Suns will figure, like, they'll have Kevin Durant coming in from the corner, Devin Booker coming in from the corner, or whatever. I've also thought about, like, will the Nuggets help wildly off of Chris Paul when he's not running pick and rolls? Because I think he's more willing to catch and shoot threes, but that's just never been his.
He doesn't want to.
Yeah, he does. He still doesn't. I think he's way more willing to. There are so many questions, but I think it's Ayton, because if he's not, then it changes how the Suns. I don't know the data on like how many Kevin Durant, Devin Booker pick and rolls are run, but like you might need to run more of those. In which case, well, then what are you doing with DeAndre Ayton at the floor? Like him hanging out the dunker spot, I would argue, makes life a lot easier on the Nuggets. And I don't want to compare him to Rudy Gobert's limitations on offense, because the Wolves ended up shooting 57.5% against Jokic at the rim, which is a big deal because it was just basically he wasn't concerned about it and the way that they were able to defend. And he was allowing like 70% shooting at the rim during the regular season. I don't think Ayton is like that type of restricted on offense, but he can bottle himself up by taking the wrong shots or bailing out.
Refusing to dunk ever.
And that's almost my flash bulb factor of how the rest of the series is going to go. And it might actually then fluctuate by game, because that's what DeAndre Ayton does at this point.
Do you want to make a pick here? I feel like I know what you have to pick.
I know what I have to pick, but I'm going to pick Nuggets in 6. This is not an indictment on the Suns. It's like I said, they've been really good, and I don't even think they've come close to reaching their peak, because there's still some offensive awkwardness. Their defense against the Nuggets actively concerns me. And I think that Denver is eventually just going to have more offensive counters to where would you agree that Phoenix might have the higher defensive ceiling? But I think that the Nuggets are going to have more answers to the Suns' peak defense than Phoenix might have to Denver's peak defense. And part of me thinks that may be irrational, because the Suns' answers are just, well, Devin Booker and Kevin Durant exist. But because of the variety of ways in which Denver's offense can, I don't want to use the word mutilate, but like that's way too strong, but go at you. I have to pick Nuggets in at least 7, because they're my title pick. And you got to roll with it if they're still alive at this point.
I don't subscribe to that theory. I'm a habitual flip-flopper, and I also didn't pick the Nuggets to win the whole thing. So I have some flexibility here. I'm torn. I think on the one hand, the Suns have 2 players that I trust in Booker and Durant in a playoff series. I think there's a great chance those are the 2 best playoff players involved in this matchup. I can also see the possibility of like Jokic we can be done with this whole, he can't hold up in the playoffs. I want that narrative to be over. I want the Nuggets
legacy series.
It's a legacy defining series. We need like a blinking, we need like the challenge light to come on for a legacy defining moment. I'm going to go Denver in 7. And it's mainly because I don't believe Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton can do enough to supplement what I think Booker and Durant will do, which will be to just be phenomenal offensively. I don't feel comfortable with that at all. Like this feels like a total coin flip to me.
And I want to make it clear, if I really believed that the Suns would win, and I would pick the Suns over the Nuggets. Yeah. It's not me just being completely stubborn. It's just I feel uneasy about them, and maybe I shouldn't, just because it's been like, oh, we've seen sub 15 games of Kevin Durant with this full group, and it's like, that's part of the problem, but it's also part of the solution.
Right. We just don't know anything about the Suns. The first round didn't teach us anything. We don't have enough of a sample from the regular season. There's too many unknowns. Like, how about this? I would say the Suns' ceiling is higher, because if everything clicks, then they're unguardable, and they do, I agree, have more sort of a better setup to defend different teams across different series than the Nuggets do. But we just don't know if they can reach that ceiling.